Hey, what's up, everybody? Hammerheart Metal Reviews here once again. It is that time of the month, time to talk about my favorite albums that were released this past month, September 2024. This month, out of every month this year, was probably the hardest to narrow down to 20 albums. Just really tough. It was absolutely stacked with killer albums. There's going to be a lot of big name bands that didn't quite make my list. If you would have told me coming to this month that new releases by Satan and Eldamar would not be in my top 20 albums of the month, I would have thought you were crazy. But that is what happened. Both of those bands, while I really like them, I was a little bit disappointed by their albums, so they didn't quite make the cut here, as well as some other big name bands as well. But I'm not going to talk about the bands that didn't make the list. Let's talk about my favorites. And as usual, I want your picks down below. Let me know which ones I got to go listen to. Always like getting your recommendations. Hopefully you can take away a couple recommendations from this list that you can go listen to. And I want the same. Give me your picks down below. So without further ado, let's get into this. Kicking off my list today, I'm going with Rivendell and their album Unsung Tales. This is a one-man band from Austria. This is epic black metal mixed with some folk. So obviously you hear that from Austria especially, you're going to think of a band like Summoning. And yes, there's a lot of similarities there. But on this album, I found he's kind of almost brought in some like Middle Eastern themes as well. This was his first album in almost 20 years. I was almost expecting a little bit more, to be honest, a little more epic nature and a little bit better songwriting, but all that being said, it's still a pretty decent album. I'm still wanting to put it on this list to talk about because you should go explore the back catalog of Rivendell as well. But nonetheless, even if this isn't the best thing he's ever released, it's still worth listening to. Up next, going with Coffin Rot and the new album Dreams of the Disturbed. So this is some US death metal, just no frills, no holds barred, just in your face, riffy, heavy death metal. Maybe it's not super unique. There's a lot of bands doing this style, but it's a very solid album that you will be sure to be banging your head to. So if you want some solid death metal, look no further than Coffin Rot. After that, I am going with Esoctrilihum and the new album Dernialh. Don't know how to pronounce it. That's terrible. Doth, Dernialh, I don't know. But this is some avant-garde black metal from France. One-man band that's very prolific in putting out albums. Almost too prolific, I would say. Like, he puts out so many releases, and so many of them are so, like, overlong and drawn out compositionally. And this one is no exception. This is, like, almost 80 minutes. The songs just drag on. There was a time when a new release by Esoctrilihum would really get me excited. I'm kind of over the band at this point. He's just putting out too much material, and it's too much that it sounds the same. There's so many similarities between other albums and even song to song. There are still some really great moments here, so I don't want it to sound like I'm shitting all over this. This is still a solid album, but it just doesn't excite me in the same way that some of his previous albums have. I would prefer if he could trim some of this, self-edit, take some more time with albums instead of putting something out every 6 months. But nonetheless, I digress. It's still worth checking out. The artwork's cool. Overall, it's still a cool album. Go check out Esoctrilihum. Up next, let's switch it up here and go with Midnight Force and the new album Severan. So this is some just classic traditional heavy metal from Scotland. This is a throwback to the glory days of heavy metal. Think like unique bands like Manila Road or Cirith Ungol. The vocals here are pretty unique. Even in moments, he kind of sounds like Hansi Kirsch, but maybe doesn't quite have the range. But this is decent. It's unique. I will say that I don't necessarily know as this is going to be one that's going to have a ton of replayable value down the road. Like, I feel like there's limited returns with this album, but it's still a ton of fun. I still think it's enjoyable. Will it be going down as an all-time classic? Maybe not, but once again, I'm sounding too negative here. These are albums that I enjoy. Go listen to Midnight Force. It's a fun album. And let's move this along. Up next, I'm going with the Black Dahlia Murder and their new album Servitude. So obviously a band that needs no introduction, melodic death metal from the USA. This is their first album that they have released since their previous vocalist passed away. So good on the band for continuing on, not just ending it. I will say the vocals here are definitely not as strong as the previous vocalist, but there's still a ton of great musicality here, great riffs. Overall, still very enjoyable. I don't think it's on par with their best by any stretch, But nonetheless, it's still a solid album and it's still worth listening to. Up next, I'm going with Mork and his new album, Civ. So this is some one-man black metal from Norway. This is very reminiscent of a band like Taka, both in the riff department and the vocal department, and also where he's not afraid to experiment with some different sounds as well. This is just an extremely solid album from front to back. The fact that it's this low down on my list is just showing how strong this month is, because this is a crazy good album and you should definitely go listen to it. Up next, I'm going with Amethyst and their debut full-length album, Throw Down the Gauntlet. So this is some more traditional heavy metal, this time from Switzerland. This almost brings in like a hard rock flavor as well. This is like 70s classic rock with some metal swagger. Think like the twin guitar parts of Iron Maiden mixed with Thin Lizzy, but then even mixed with like some REO Speedwagon or other 70s classic rock bands of that nature. Like, it's really easy listening, but it's pretty fun overall. I know this is getting a ton of hype and I think it deserves it. It's a pretty solid album. I don't know as it's like my favorite trad metal album of the year. I've heard some people saying that, but nonetheless, it's a solid album. If you're into the style, you should go give it a listen. Up next, back with some more black metal with Isolert and their new album, Wounds of Desolation. So this is some Greek black metal this time around, but when I say that, you're going to think of all these other Greek bands like Coware or Rotting Christ. But to me, it sounds more inspired by like Norwegian black metal than Greek black metal, just in the overall style. This is more of a straightforward black metal style, but this has excellent vocals, really great atmosphere and riffs throughout, and it's another just really solid album from front to back. This month is just extremely hard to rank, and as I usually say with these videos, take these rankings with a grain of salt. These are based on like first impressions. Obviously, I have only been listening to some of these albums for a few weeks, so the order of these will change over time, but this is just a list of albums I think you should go check out, and Isolert is one of those. Up next, let's switch it up to some power metal with Krilloan and the new album Return of the Heralds. So like I said, some power metal from Sweden. I really dug their debut from a couple years ago, and I think this one builds upon it and actually improves upon that debut. There's tons to like in this album. There's lots of variation from song to song, and just overall a very solid power metal album. So if you're into power metal, go listen to Krilloan. Up next, I'm going with Warlords and their new album Sol Invictus on Umbre Satanae. So this band is labeled as Blackened Death Thrash, but they're from Germany, I should have mentioned as well. At this point, like, I've checked out some of their early material and it was a lot thrashier than this album. I will say there's still some touches of thrash, but I feel like that label doesn't necessarily suit them anymore. This is like melodic blackened death metal, a la like Necrophobic, Dissection, bands in that style, a lot of more mid-paced stuff. There's still some fast, aggressive moments there as well, but all in all, this is a super infectious and hard-hitting album. I absolutely love it. It's just a style that I can easily get into, and it's really well, the songs are well written, and it's just well executed. Go check out Warlust. If anything I just said sounds like it might be up your alley. All right, one more before we hit the top 10. Just missing out on the top 10. I'm going with Officium Triste with Hortus Venenum. I'm probably mispronouncing all of that. This is some atmospheric, melodic death doom from the Netherlands. This band's been around a long time. This is very mournful and emotional music. It's just really well composed, and it's just a killer heavy album. It's going to pull on your heartstrings. Like, not putting this in my top 10 is almost painful to me because this is a really killer album. Any other month, I'm sure this would be right up there. So once again, just because this is not super high up on the list, don't skip this album. I think you should go listen to this album because it's killer. If you're into like melodic death doom, give it a listen. All right, now we're into the top 10, my 10 favorite albums from the month. I'm just going to take a sip of water here, try to guess what's coming up. All right, drum roll. Here we go. In 10th place, I'm going with Obsar and the new album Propastnyk. Another one that I probably cannot pronounce. This is some melodic, folky black metal from Slovakia. I absolutely loved their previous album, which I did a full review of on this channel. It was called Porchornili Hori Porchornili Lishi. That one was from 2022, and that was outstanding. I will say on my first few listens of the new one, it's not hitting me quite as hard as that previous album, but I don't want to just compare it to the previous album. This one goes in a little bit of a different direction with some more piano, and it really just adds this texture to it. And this style of folky black metal is just right up my alley. I absolutely love folky black metal, as I'm sure you are aware if you watch my channel. And yeah, if you haven't heard of this band, go check out the previous album, but also check out their new one as well. It is still a very good album. Up next in 9th, I'm going with Blitzkrieg with their self-titled album. So Brian Ross, the vocalist from Satan, I feel bad that I didn't include Satan on this list, but I was really into that album, but he released 2 albums within a week of each other, and this one is the one that I think you should go listen to, being Blitzkrieg self-titled album. I think it kills the new Satan album in pretty much everything: production, songwriting, catchiness, riffs, everything. This album is awesome. It's just catchy, fun, new wave of British heavy metal done right. This band is definitely not as well known as Satan, but maybe they should be, especially if they're still pumping out albums like this. If you just like some classic heavy metal, give this album a listen. You will not be disappointed. Up next in 8th, going with some more black metal with Horna and the new album Nyx Hymenja yolle. Probably mispronouncing that as well. I do not speak Finnish, but yeah, black metal legends from Finland. This album is just full of killer black metal riffs. Like, the guitar playing on here is top notch. The first 5 songs, they're all like hymn 1, hymn 2, up to hymn 5. Killer black metal. And then all of a sudden on the closing track, throws you for a little bit of a loop with like a Finnish folky type of song. And it's just great. It's a great way to bookend the album. And yeah, all in all, a very solid black metal release. Go listen to Horna. Up next in 7th, I'm going with Typhonian and a new album, The Gate of the Veiled Beyond. So this is some German death metal. When I say that, it's like old school death metal, but they do bring in a pinch of progressive death metal as well. It's not too much on the prog side, but just a touch. I have read some stuff about the band that they say one of their main influences, Edge of Sanity, and I get that. By listening to this, you can kind of hear that influence in the songs. The closing song on this album is 19 minutes long. If you wanted to just go get a taste of this album, go listen to that song. 20 minutes of goodness, and that should tell you everything you need to know about the band. Definitely a solid album that you should go listen to. Up next in 6th, I'm going with Helvetets Port with their new album, Warlords. This is some Swedish heavy traditional metal. This would be for fans of bands like Heavy Load or Enforcer. It's kind of that old style Swedish heavy metal like Heavy Load or Gotham City, but with modern production like a band like Enforcer. And it's just classic metal goodness here. There's been a ton of great traditional heavy metal albums this month, but this one is my favorite of the bunch. I just dig everything about this album. The songs are catchy, the riffs are great, awesome solos. Everything about this album I dig. Just missed out on my top 5, but this month is sick. And yeah, that's my favorite trad metal album of the month. Okay, now we're into the top 5. My 5 favorite albums from September. In 5th place, another one I'm surely going to mispronounce. Kanonenfieber with Die Urkatastrophe. This is some German melodic blackened death metal. Very war themed. I was a big fan of his debut. The guy behind the band is Noise. He's in a few other projects as well. This one is just full of killer riffs. I know this is a very overhyped album, maybe too much overhyped, but it's for a reason. It's a very solid album. It's got these like sing-alongable marching tempo choruses. Even though I do not speak German at all, you can still just sing along after listening to it a couple times. So yeah, like I said, overall a very solid album. Maybe it's a little bit overhyped. I don't think it's the best album of the year or anything like that, but it's still a very good album. That's why it's in my top 5. Up next in 4th, an album that just came out, Ripped to Shreds with Sanchi. So this is some US death metal with some grind in there as well. A lot of this album reminds me of the same style of like a band like Exhumed, and Exhumed is one of my favorite death metal bands, so that's definitely a good thing in my books, but this one is just so killer. Like I said, this just came out, but even though I've only listened to it a few times, I'm still putting it in my top 5 because it's just blowing me away with how much I'm digging this. It's going to be getting a lot of replays, and this could even rise higher in time. It's just the style of death metal that I absolutely love. Great vocals, great riffs, great solos on display here too. Just a really solid band that released a killer album. Up next in 3rd, one of my favorite atmospheric black metal bands, Winter Filleth, with a new album, The Imperious Horizon. So a band that shouldn't need any introduction at this point, but if you're unfamiliar with them, they're from the UK, atmospheric black metal, been around a long time. I love pretty much everything this band has ever released. This one is pretty typical of them at this point, just an outstanding album that I would expect nothing less at this point in their career, but this one I think is going to be a late career highlight. It's just front to back, very solid. It is a long album, but there are just so many highlights throughout. There's not really any weak moments here. There's tons of like ebbs and flows, like most of their albums have. But in the middle of this album, you've got the title track, which is probably my favorite track on the album. Then right after it, you got a song, In Silent Grace, that features the vocalist from Primordial, and it just adds this whole other flavor to it. It's like that song was made for him to sing it, and it just suits it so well. It was a combination that I didn't know I was craving, Winter Phyllis with the vocalist from Primordial, and it just works so well. A great fucking song in the middle of this album. All in all, a very solid release. Absolutely love it. It's only in third because there's some killer albums this month, but this one easily could have been number one. Up next in second, an album I did a full review of, and that is Bloody Valkyria with their debut album, Kingdom in Fire. So this is a one-man band from Finland. This is epic, melodic, atmospheric black metal, but it brings in some touches of like melodic death metal and even some power metal as well. It's epic and catchy. Like I said, I did a full review, so I won't go into too much detail here. Definitely go check out my full review if you want more details, but it's long compositions that are just epic as hell. Epic is the key word here, and the song compositions, the songwriting is just top notch here. The production maybe could be a little bit better. The fake drumming or like program drumming isn't the best, but don't let that detract you. This is just an absolutely killer album, and I absolutely love it. That's why it's in second place. So that just leaves one. My favorite album from the month of September is The Flight of Sleipnir, with the new album Nature's Cadence. So this is some epic blackened doom with a nice dose of folk in there from the USA. The reason I have this album number one is because I've just fallen in love with it. It is got so much variation. It's full of different styles of songs while still maintaining cohesiveness throughout. It's epic blackened doom, but then they bring in this like Western folky flavor in just spots. They don't overdo it. They bring in like pedal steel guitar that really gives us it nice touch, only in a couple songs. And it's just got this epic nature to it as well. And the way they blend all these different influences together, but still just sound like them. Like, yeah, there's moments that are going to remind me of a band like Agalloch. Then other moments that remind me of like Wayfarer. And then like there's so much different stuff going on. It's got the doominess with that blackened touch of a band like Mizmor, but they do their own spin on it, and there's so many different influences, and the songwriting is just epic. There's only 5 tracks here, and I just love it. I think this is going to go down as one of my favorites of the year. I can't get enough of it. Go check out The Flight of Sleipnir, Nature's Cadence, a killer new album if you have not heard it yet. So anyways, those are just my thoughts and opinions as usual, my picks. I want to get yours down below as well. Like I said earlier, I hope you could take away a couple albums from this list, and I want to get a couple albums from you guys. Let me know which ones I've missed and which ones I absolutely need to check out. So, until next time, Hammer Heart Metal Reviews, out.